running for days now, a harum-scarum tumbling flight through passages and tunnels. She was hungry and exhausted and more tired than her body could stand, and each successive door was proving harder to open. After 4 days of flight, she had found a hiding place, a tiny stone burrow under the world, where she would be safe, or so she prayed, and at last she slept. Mr. Creep had hired Ross at the last floating market, which had been held in Westminster Abbey. Think of him, he told Mr. Vandermeer, as a canary. Sings? Asked Mr. Vandermeer. I doubt it. I sincerely and utterly doubt it. Mr. Creep ran a hand through his lank orange hair. No, my fine friend, I was thinking metaphonically, more along the lines of the birds. They take down mines. Mr. Vandermeer nodded, comprehension dawning slowly. Yes, a canary. Mr. Ross had no other resemblance to a canary. He was huge, almost as big as Mr. Valdemar, and extremely grubby and quite hairless, and he said very little, although he had made a point of telling each of them that he liked to kill things, and he was good at it, and this amused Mr. Creep and Mr. Vandermeer. But he was a canary, and he never knew it, so Mr. Ross went first, in his filthy t-shirt and his crusted blue jeans, and Creep and Vandermeer walked behind him in their elegant black suits. There are 4 simple ways for the observant to tell Mr. Creep and Mr. Vandermeer apart. First, Mr. Vandermeer is 2.5 heads taller than Mr. Creep. Second, Mr. Creep has eyes of a faded china blue, while Mr. Vandermeer's eyes are brown. Third, while Mr. Vandermeer fashioned the rings he wears on his right hand out of the skulls of 4 ravens, Mr. Creep has no obvious jewellery. Fourth, Mr. Creep likes words, while Mr. Vandermeer is always hungry. Also, they look nothing at all alike. A rustle in the tunnel darkness. Mr. Vandermeer's knife was in his hand, and then it was no longer in his hand, and it was quivering gently, almost 30 feet away. He walked over to his knife and picked it up by the hilt. There was a great rat impaled on the blade, its mouth opening and closing impotently as the life fled. He crushed its skull between finger and thumb. Now, there's one rat that won't be telling any more tales, said Mr. Creep. He chuckled at his own joke. Mr. Vandermeer did not respond. Rat. Tails. Get it? Mr. Vandermeer pulled the rat from the blade and began to munch on it thoughtfully, at first. Mr. Creep slapped it out of his hands. Stop that, he said. Mr. Vandermeer put his knife away, a little sullenly. Buck up, hissed Mr. Creep encouragingly. There will always be another rat. Now, onward. Things to do, people to damage. 3 years in London change Richard, although it had changed the way he perceived the city. Richard had originally imaged London as a grey city, even a black city, from pictures he had seen, and he was surprised to find it filled with colour. It was a city of red brick and white stone, red buses and large black taxis, bright red mailboxes, and green grassy parks and cemeteries. It was a city in which the very old and the awkwardly new jostle each other, not uncomfortably, but without respect. A city of shops and offices and restaurants and homes, of parks and churches, of ignored monuments and remarkably and palatial palaces. A city of hundreds of districts with strange names: Crouch End, Chalk Farms, Earl's Court, Marble Arch, and oddly distinct identities. A noisy, dirty, cheerful, troubled city, which fed on tourists, needed them as it despised them, in which the average speed of transportation through the city had not increased in 300 years, following 500 years of fitful road widening and unskillful compromises between the needs of traffic, whether horse-drawn or, more recently, motorized, and the need of pedestrians, and city inhabited by and teeming with people of every color and manner and kind. When he had first arrived, he had found London huge, odd, fundamentally incomprehensive, with only the tube map, an elegant multicolored topographical display of underground railway lines and stations, giving it any semblance of order. Gradually he realized that the tube map was a handy fiction that made life easier but bore no resemblance to the reality of the shape of the city above. It was like belonging to a political party, he thought once, and then, having tried to explain the resemblance between the tube map and politics at a party to a cluster of bewildered strangers, he had decided in the future to leave political comments to others. He continued slowly by a process of osmosis and white knowledge, which is like white noise, only more useful, to comprehend the city, a process that accelerated when he realized that the actual city of London itself was no bigger than a square mile, stretching from Aldgate in the east to Fleet Street and the law courts of the Old Bailey in the west. A tiny municipality now home to London's financial institutions, and that was where it had all begun. 2,000 years before, London had been a little Celtic village on the north shore of the Thames, which the Romans had encountered, then settled in. London had grown slowly until roughly 1,000 years later it met the tiny royal city of Westminster immediately to the west, and once the London Bridge had been built, London touched the town of Southwark directly across the river, and it continued to grow. Fields and woods and marshlands slowly were vanishing beneath the flourishing town, and it continued to expand, encountering other little villages and hamlets as it grew, like Whitechapel and Deptford to the east, Hammersmith and Shepherd's Bush to the west, Camden and Islington in the north, Battersea and Lambeth across the Thames to the south, absorbing all of them, just as a pool of mercury encounters and incorporates smaller beings shades of mercury, leaving only their names behind. So, that was it for my first video. I hope that you found it relaxing